Hi, everybody.
Hey,
How's it going? Let's see. We have a lot of things. We have lots of things to talk about. We have lots of opinions.
we are probably going to go live again this week, right? Did we talk
Yeah,
about Wednesday? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, we're going to talk about the online smear campaign experts, if you could
yes,
be an expert in such a thing.
yeah.
but,
Um,
but that's not for today.
yes. Today, we're going to go over Jennifer Freyd's expert report. I've done a video on it, but it was really short. But before we get to that, I want to go on a rant about Van Zandt because I said something in Britt's comment section yesterday, and I feel like it deserves a little bit more of an explanation. So I'm going to throw up some stuff. Okay. So if you need a refresher on what the Van Zandt thing is, so Blake Lively had this whole smear campaign stuff happen to her in August of 2024. And on September the 27th of 2024, after Jennifer Abel had been fired from her employment at Jones Works, Abel is, remember, Wayfarer's PR person. Jones Works is the firm that employs Abel. And so they're kind of both the PR people. So on September the 27th of 2024, this attorney, Samantha Katz, put her name on a lawsuit called Van Zandt v. Doe's 1 through 10 inclusive. And what this is this is it's three causes of action: breach of contract, breach of the covenant of good faith and fair dealing, and faithless servant liability. These are all contract claims. So Van Zandt is suing someone that it has some sort of privity with for breach of contract, but they are suing John Doe's 1 through 10. So the question here is, how do you know that you have a contract if you don't know the name of the person that you're suing? And I won't read the Van Zandt lawsuit, but just to say there's not much in there that's going to be able to answer that question for us, because these are not, they just don't really explain it. They just basically restate the definition of these causes of action and say they're suing somebody that they don't know. Okay, so the next thing I want to point out is my issue with Van Zandt. So what happened is Van Zandt, they got a subpoena. Actually, let me pull up the subpoena just to show you guys. They gave this subpoena to Stephanie Jones. So we see up here Van Zandt for Doe's 1 through 10 inclusive. And then they sent this subpoena, a New York State subpoena, to Stephanie Jones and Jones Works. Okay, so even though we're saying up here we don't know the names of the people we have a cause of action against, now suddenly we've got something, right? We've got Stephanie Jones. So let's see if this is, oh, look, there's Samantha Katz again. Okay, so it's a whole thing about this, and this just to me doesn't make a lot of sense. It's asking about, it mentions Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and the Lively and Reynolds companies, mentions It Ends With Us, Justin Baldoni. This is a hell of a lot of names for a case where you don't know any of the defendants. And then they ask for anything related to sexual harassment or retaliation involving Lively or Reynolds or their families or their companies. And Ryan Reynolds has never been an employee of any of these organizations. Why is Ryan here? He's not an employee. You can't sexually harass, retaliate, because he doesn't have any sort of employment relationship here. So, retaliatory efforts to disparage Lively Reynolds and the Lively Reynolds companies, it's not employment retaliation to go after Reynolds if you've never employed him. He's not
Right.
he's not suing for anything. So anyway, they sent this. It's got all these names. It sounds like they
Also,
know.
if you
Yeah.
know there's retaliation, you know who the contract is with
Right.
because you know who employed you.
You know who the employer is. So the question here is, what is Van Zandt, right? So it's like Van Zandt is suing these John Does 1 through 10. What is Van Zandt? So we have some answers in the deposition of Justine Harris, who is the 30B6, the expert witness for Van Zandt. And what she says is Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds each own 50% of Van Zandt. All right, so Lively is the president, Reynolds is the vice president, and the CFO. All right, so what do they do? This is a company that was established in 2019 to handle payroll and other administrative matters for a variety of household employees. So you guys are the employers? So let's go back to the retaliation. So when we say we're looking for retaliatory, but you guys are employers? So are you I'm confused. What's going on, right? Because retaliatory efforts to disparage Lively, but you guys own what? Was somebody employing Van Zandt? I don't understand. So anyway, health benefits, other employee benefits that are handled through Vanzant. So Vanzant is an employer who is suing somebody they don't know who is also Vanzant's employer, but they don't know what their name is. And they're suing for breach of contract, not for retaliation or sexual harassment, but for breach of contract. So why is this something that I think a lot of attorneys are upset with? And why is this something that I have been telling people this is a bad idea? So hear me out, because this is the thing. So in the United States, when you're looking, well, let me go back to my friendly subpoena thing. So this is what's called a friendly subpoena. So in this case, this subpoena went to Stephanie Jones, and Stephanie Jones didn't notify Baldoni or Wayfarer or Jennifer Abel or any of these people that their data was going to be used to respond to this subpoena. And so this is what's called a friendly subpoena, right? It's a subpoena that's issued, obviously I got this off Wikipedia, to an individual or entity who might otherwise testify or submit evidence willingly, but is prevented due to a higher order legal, ethical, or regulatory loyalty or fiduciary responsibility, which in this case would be Jones's contract with Wayfarer saying you have to keep our shit private. It's called a friendly subpoena because the recipient would otherwise be or is likely to be willing to cooperate once they're issued the subpoena. Okay, so where am I going with this?
It's a friendly subpoena. I'd love to help you, but I can't. But
right.
If you made me.
Right. If I got that paperwork, then I would be official and I could give you what I need.
Court making me.
Right.
My hands would be tied. Yeah.
Right. And in fact, this is what Stephanie Jones has said, right? I have a subpoena. I complied with it. And my contract says I can comply with a lawful order. So why does this matter if you're just a regular person in the United States? So this matters because there is something called the privacy rule in HIPAA. So this has to do with your health and personal information. A HIPAA-covered provider or plan may disclose information to a party issuing a subpoena only if the notification requirements are met. The provider or plan should receive evidence that there were reasonable efforts to notify the person who is the subject of the information about the request, so the person has a chance to object, or to seek a protective order for the information for the court. So a protective order could be something like the attorney's eyes only that we've seen in this case, or it could be something that prevents the information from being published in like the New York Times, right? It would be something that prevents the information being transferred with the subpoena from the public. So if something is covered with HIPAA, then there has to be a reasonable effort from the anybody that has to follow this privacy rule to make sure that the person whose data you're turning over knows that all of this is going on so they have a chance to exercise their rights. In the Stephanie Jones case, and I know that's not a medical thing, it's not a HIPAA thing, but in the Stephanie Jones case, she didn't notify any of the people whose data she was submitting that their information was being turned over. And the reason why that matters is because in most states, check your state, but at least in my state, we have these things called pregnancy resource centers that offer free pregnancy tests, but ultimately exist to convince women not to get abortions. They don't offer abortions. They don't offer birth control prescriptions. They do not offer any sort of medical or reproductive care. They look like this. This is not a doctor's office. In fact, these entities are not covered under HIPAA because they are not medical providers. Even though you might walk in, see all of this setup, and assume that this is a medical provider. So hypothetically, if a pro-life organization served a friendly subpoena to this lady who exists solely to convince women not to get abortions, she could comply with a friendly subpoena, and a list of everyone who has ever tested positive in one of these facilities could be given to a website or the New York Times or any sort of pro-life organization without any of the people whose data is subject to the friendly subpoena being able to contest the publication or distribution of their information. So you could create a website that has all of these people's names, everybody who's tested positive at one of these, positive for pregnancy at one of these facilities going however far back, throw it up on a website, and nobody has the ability to stop the disclosure of their data because these are not HIPAA covered entities. They do not provide enough medical stuff to be covered. So there is legislation that wants to limit it. So at the very least, they have to tell you that they are not HIPAA covered entities and they are not actual medical facilities, right? She's saying the advertising isn't deception. They provide an important resource, right? We're about serving women in their time of need. But they don't perform any medical treatment. They don't provide any sort of, so they can give you all of this information. They can give over this information in friendly subpoena. And yeah, you could possibly go after it, but only if it's an abusive process. And by that point, your information is wherever your information was sent, right? So if a person sends a subpoena to one of these organizations and says, hey, I'm the potential father of a kid, and I want to see if this woman ever came to your facility, and I want to know if she ever tested positive for pregnancy, because I'm going to sue her under a law that maybe exists in some states that can criminalize or cause civil penalties for abortion. There's your path. And Van Zandt, as much as it might seem like part of this celebrity drama case, that is exactly the process that was used here, right? They just file a lawsuit against a Jane Doe, but then in the actual subpoena, we have all these people, and they don't need to be notified of their rights because they're not who the case is about. And of course, they used Van Zandt rather than Lively, so that nobody would be notified, nobody could find this case, and none of the people involved would know that this had happened. The goal possibly was for none of these people to ever know that their information had been disclosed. Right. And at least the public, from anyone following this case, we still don't know how much information was disclosed. We don't even know if they stuck to this amount of the subpoena.
Or how long she was being monitored, or, right. Yeah, we don't know the scope at all.
Right.
And I'm not sure that Jen does either, because based on her amended complaint, it is still pretty vague.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know what was turned over. There was no ability to challenge the scope or the limits of this. Again, Ryan Reynolds has no business being on here. And I also think in the wording of this subpoena, it also includes, all documents and communications concerning Lively Reynolds, their families, or Lively Reynolds companies. That's not limited to conversations involving Wayfarer. That's why Jamila Jamil's text messages are in here, because they were on Jennifer Abel's phone, and Jamila Jamil, who has she's talking about Blake. Mm-hmm. So they didn't even limit it to somebody that Lively has a cause of action. She wants to know every single JonesWorks client that has potentially talked shit about her or her husband.
Right.
So anyway, there's my rant, because I did call Van Zandt's stochastic terrorism in your comment section, so I felt like it needed an explanation.
No, I think that's an excellent point, and I think, people love to be like, oh, slippery slope. In these times, this is a foreseeable outcome of the use of a subpoena power. And to be clear, Rule 45 does not. So Rule 45 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure governs subpoenas. What you need to have on your subpoena, how you need to word things, and it gives you really clear instructions on what you're supposed to do to the person the subpoena is directed at. And there is no language about the person whose information is being sought, which in this day and age is different, right? We have social media companies and we have tech companies holding a lot of personal information. Some of them fight it, like Reddit. Apple was really good about fighting it for a long time. I don't know if they still do. Mm-hmm. They had all sorts of protections on their phones so that, like, if you were in a criminal trial, they were not going to turn over your information and give them, the law enforcement, I use quotey fingers there for a reason, right, access to your phone. But we could see them walk back from that ledge for a lot of different reasons, right? Political pressure. I could think of a million different reasons. And so I think it sounds like we're being bombastic and, oh my God, this is what could happen. This is already happening. Like, we're seeing ICE send subpoenas for Reddit users based on what they're posting online. And a bunch of people dropped into my comments and they were like, oh, because they were doxing ICE agents. They're public servants. They have no right to privacy. Their badge numbers, their information should be readily available, and they are not. So they are harming our constitutional rights. They are hurting people in the streets, and standing up for ICE agents is a choice in my comment section. Also, doxing Nazis is definitely going to be like a femme alt punk band that I make in my next life.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm pretty sure, is it Wilkie Farr or is it Manat and Phelps? that is doing the pro bono work for Trump. I think it's Wayfarer.
Yeah, I think it was Wilkie, because Manat was like, we stand for the rule of law. And I was like, didn't you send a sham subpoena?
So let me just... So, yeah, this is... Here we go. So Wayfarer and Gallagher, which is one of Blake Lively's law firms, not the one that Samantha Katz is from, but the other law firm that is representing her. They are already doing pro bono work for the Trump administration. So, I mean, somebody who works for the Trump administration is involved in at least one case where there's been a sham subpoena, right? Yeah. Wasn't their attorneys that technically did it, but, you know, I guess I would think they were paying attention to what the actual outcome was and if there's going to be consequences.
Did you get that link I sent you?
Yes.
Can you pull that up?
Yeah.
So the rules of federal civil procedure, Rule 11 is sanctions. Almost every state has damn near verbatim language. This is New York's. So if you scroll down to section C, subpart C, right here is where we see subpoena is frivolous if, or excuse me, a lawsuit is frivolous if it's completely without merit in law and cannot be supported by a reasonable argument for an extension, modification, or reversal of existing law. I think we can make the argument that a contract case is that isn't based on a contract, is without merit in law, right? Is undertaken primarily to delay or prolong the resolution of litigation or to harass or maliciously injure another. I think we can meet that, right?
Mm-hmm.
To maliciously injure another, I think is really, Jen Abel was maliciously injured here.
Yeah.
It asserts material factual statements that are false. I think this is the one where they lose here, right? This is a sanctionable lawsuit under New York law, under federal law for sure. This is a little bit different, this language, than Rule 11 under the federal rules, but again, it's very close. Frivolous conduct shall include the making of a frivolous motion for costs or sanctions under this section. In determining whether the conduct undertaken was frivolous, the court shall consider, among other issues, the circumstances under which the conduct took place, including time available for investigating the legal or factual basis of the conduct, and whether or not the conduct was continued when its lack or legal factual basis was apparent, should have been apparent, or was brought to the attention of counsel or the party. I don't know how they get past this. This still seems sanctionable, right? Whether it's under federal law, whether it's under New York state law, there's a very solid argument that the complaint that was brought falls into one of these three categories that makes it sanctionable.
And I did want to bring up, because Zane said the state of New York needs to pass legislation preventing this. It's already not allowed. Like it's already not okay. It's just whether or not Wayfarer is going to go about it. You know, the reason why I think somebody said, how come the judge hasn't done anything, is because no one has asked him to yet. Maybe they will.
Yeah. I think tightening up Rule 45 too, tightening up our subpoena power and just adding some language in the subpoena statutes, in the subpoena rules, in the rules of civil procedure, whether it's state or federal, to say a party whose information is sought shall be notified of the subpoena.
California does have that, which is one of the interesting things in this case, is that Jennifer Abel is a resident of California, and it still applies to her, although this is a New York state case. Right. So she does still need to get notified according to California law. Yeah.
And most attorneys I know would notify the party. I mean, most of the time you're seeking like someone's work information, right? Or you're subpoenaing somebody else and you notify the other party, because that is very much in the rule. You have to notify the other party that the subpoena has been sent. But
right. And so in this case, because they sued John Doe's, there was no one to notify.
Right.
So, yeah, exactly. Prickly Pear says we're all Californians. We should all be Californians for as far as notifying subpoenas.
I deal with DV a lot. I say this all the time. I deal with DV a lot in my work, especially in family law, and I just could see someone who's absolutely abusive and unhinged using this mechanism. It doesn't seem that far-fetched. The example you gave, hey, I think I impregnated someone. Did they come here? Oh, yeah. An abuser would do that 10 times out of 10.
Right. And would these pregnancy resource centers comply? Well, now that there's laws in some states that criminally punish women for abortions that they may very well be in support of, there's an incentive to give them the evidence that they would need to report them to the police.
Right.
So, and there's nothing, I mean, it'd be very hard to stop it. And even if you stopped it, it would still make the stuff admissible. Like if somebody gets it from one of these resource centers and gives it to the police, as long as the police didn't solicit it unlawfully, they can still use it.
And that's the thing. We have a reactionary system. And as you guys have seen, the civil law system doesn't have as robust protections. I say protections kind of lightly because, but we don't have the same kinds of constitutional protections under the Constitution that criminal law does, because all of the right to attorney and due process and all of that, the Supreme Court considers criminal protections.
Yeah.
And civil law falls outside of that. So if we have this reactionary system and you're still allowed to do these nefarious things and bring them into a civil trial, who's stopping it then? Nobody.
Right. And then I think it creates that loophole of, if you give it to the cops, as long as the cops didn't commit a crime,
right,
they can still use it. So it's not even really that safe with the criminal either.
As my own little soapbox, when I was studying criminal procedure, a class you should take in law school, and I took victims in Crim Pro instead, like an idiot. So I learned Crim Pro, criminal procedure, for the bar. And I was texting all my friends in criminal, and I was like, what the fuck do you mean that this, and this can happen? What do you mean? What do you mean? It was like that Jennifer Lawrence. What do you mean? What do you mean? That was me studying Crim Pro, because I was like, oh, none of these protections are actually super strong in any way, which is a whole different post.
Yeah.
A whole different video, but... do you want to talk about DARVO?
Let's talk about DARVO. Is this the DARVO? Yeah.
I think Lauren is out there also talking about DARVO. Shout out to Court of Random Opinion.
Yes. Let me see if she is still alive. She's still alive. She's talking about the DARVO lady, or Dr. DARVO.
Yeah. So I don't want to really double up on what she's doing. Although I don't really know what she's doing, but I do kind of want to talk about the DARVO lady in context of Rule 702. So Rule 702 governs what experts are allowed to testify to. And they cannot just be testifying about anything and everything. They have to stay within the certain parameters of what Rule 702 allows. And that was further clarified by a case called Daubert versus Merrill Industries. Why do I always want to say Merrill Lynch?
Merrill Dow
we call
Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. Merrill Dow. Why can't I remember that? Because we call it the Daubert standard, and Merrill gets left out like the lucky sons of guns that they are. So we're looking at whether the technique or theory in question can be tested, whether it's been subjected to publication and peer review, its known potential error rate, the maintenance standards and standards controlling its operation, and whether it's attracted widespread acceptance within a relevant scientific community. And really distilling that into layman's terms, does this expert and their methodology speak to an issue? Not come to a final conclusion, not restate a party's case. Does it add more information to an issue so that a jury better understands that issue? Is it the right person, right? Do they have the right credentials to be distilling this information through the right kind of mechanism, so an accepted smaller error rate, right, or at least a known error rate, right, is this person with the credentialed to run this information through kind of this machine, and is the information they ran through the machine the right kind of information to give you what would be accepted within the scientific community to speak to that issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think of it as right person, right machine, right type of distillation for the issues.
Right.
And that's more or less how it was explained to me by someone who is a way better teacher than I could ever be.
So yeah, we'd agree that this report totally meets all those standards, wouldn't we?
Not even close. I was reading it again today, and I just was like, the first time I read it, I was like, oh, this is getting kicked for sure. So the Wayfarer parties move to exclude, right? And they say, where is it? You know, she provides an analysis of what she reviewed based on her knowledge and research as a scholar of betrayal trauma, institutional betrayal, and DARVO. And that's really where she sticks to a lot of this. So she looked primarily at depositions of the parties. She looked at some of the text messages between the parties. Let me catch the other ones. So already, that's not the Freyd report. That would help me if I... Okay, hold on. My screen, every time I open it, keeps popping back to the other open browsers. I'm one of those people that has like 10 open screens at all times. So she gives us her CV at the end. It is very lengthy, but you will notice that she does not have clinical work. She mostly does research and works in academia. So already she's not somebody who's qualified to say that Blake experienced certain mental health impacts from what she experienced. So we are looking at a certain amount of documents. We'll say about 40 documents, some videos, and then she looked at 15 depositions. Blake, Elizabeth Talbot, Vivian Baker, Warren Zavala, Ange Giannetti, Alex Sachs, Shelley Ann Carroll. Who is that?
That is Blake's makeup artist or hairstylist, I think.
Okay. Jenny Slate, Colleen Hoover, Isabel Ferrer, Greenstein, Baldoni, Heath, which I think are just the different days of their depositions. So, okay. So then so that's the information she's looking at, right? She's looking at all third-hand accounts of what happened and maybe some documentation of what happened, a couple videos along the way. I'd imagine she watched the dance video. I didn't double check it. I think she watched the dance video, and I think she refers to the recorded scene where he goes, "I'm allowed to say this because my wife is here, but you look hot." Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the sexual harassment training. I think she refers to that in her report. So what she comes up with is that Blake has experienced certain kind of trauma. Why is she saying that? She did not analyze Blake as a clinician.
Right. I also just feel like, you probably have said this, but I also think it's kind of a obvious thing, but DARVO is a thing that abusers do to their victims. So using the term DARVO presumes that the person is the abuser. Think of it this way. If a person was factually innocent, if Alice is accusing Bob of something, and Bob is like, my defense isn't that I didn't do it because technically I didn't do it. My defense is I was in fucking Canada, and you're saying I did this in Florida. Then Bob's going to say, I didn't do it. That's denying. Alice is not being correct or honest about what she's saying. That's attacking. And then I am getting falsely accused, which is reversing the victim and offender to where Alice is now bringing me into something that I don't deserve to be in. So somebody who is factually innocent is also going to do these same things. So DARVO is something that you're doing when it's the abuse, they're already definitely the abuser, right? You have to establish that first. And then these minimization tactics get discussed in that context.
And I've seen abusers use DARVO, even if they don't use the term.
Mm.
I have seen abusers use it a lot. So if you don't have the right type of information, that you're pumping through the right type of machine to understand who the victim and who the abuser is and who's experiencing actual psychological trauma, right? Or if you don't have the full story, like the fact that Blake was texting her friends to take over this film, and that wasn't an attempt to smear Blake, that was actually factually correct. If you don't have that information, you can risk looking at the abuser and going, you're the victim subject to DARVO here.
Right.
Because the other side is accusing you of something.
Right. Basically, anybody who's got a counterclaim in court over the same basic facts is DARVOing, right? They're denying the allegations. They're accusing them of something else, and they're reversing the plaintiff and defendant, right?
Exactly.
So
she says a lot of stuff in this report, like the one I have pulled up, individuals who experience betrayal trauma are more likely to suffer from symptoms of depression, anxiety, dissociation, personality disorders, substance abuse, and even physical health problems. Later, she says people who experience institutional trauma are at risk of some of those same things.
Right.
That is not for her to speak to. One, because that is not at issue in this case. Blake has said garden variety, as everybody has astutely pointed out. We are at garden variety distress. We are not looking at whether or not she experienced psychological trauma because she waived the ability to bring in evidence of that. So this expert cannot come in and say she's at risk or more likely to experience this stuff. One, because she didn't look at Blake's doctor's records. So she didn't take the right information to distill it through the right machine, right? And two, it's not speaking to an issue at play here. So that on its own should get kicked. Also, it's likely to confuse the jury. If you say somebody is likely to experience this, what the jury may perceive is she perceived this. Because an expert just got up on the stand and told me
and said
she experienced betrayal trauma, so she must have experienced psychological trauma.
And
substance
so with
abuse, physical health problems, all that.
Right. With mental health or physical health for that matter, you have, I mean, there's an eggshell plaintiff thing, right? Where you're saying that like you kind of take the plaintiff as you get them. But then at the same time, if somebody had a pre-existing mental condition, then you would get to kind of poke at that to say how much of these symptoms are related to this versus this. You know, for example, if there's postpartum depression involved, let's say she's got a postpartum depression diagnosis, how much of the stuff you're experiencing on set is due to that versus this other thing? Because you do get to argue that the damages can be, you know, mitigated by this other intervening cause, which is why the medical records are at issue. Because if you choose not to bring that information forward, you shouldn't then get to turn around and argue, well, then 100% of these issues must have been caused by this.
Right.
So you kind of forfeited the issue.
Exactly. It's not an issue for an expert to speak to because it's been forfeited.
Right.
Going kind of bit by bit and going back to, is she the right person to run this through the machine? I kind of pointed it out earlier, but she specifically says, although the extensive empirical research on institutional betrayal from my laboratory has been primarily in the context of employees, college students, and sexual abuse, we have also published one influential study regarding institutional betrayal experienced by high school students. Now, she does say in the context of employees, so we could make the argument, all right, she's looked at employees before, but it does seem like the bulk of her research, when I was looking at it, is about students. And so students who are institutionally betrayed by their school.
Right. And as this is something where I'm close to an expert on this, like my co-author is an expert witness on stuff. We basically only do stuff with college students. We are talking about people between the ages of 18 to 22 who are very little life experience, very little autonomy because they've never really left, you know, the school system. And so there are certain studies, like false confession studies, where we can try and do some of these things because some of these psychological effects are the same. But there are some studies, like damage award studies, kids at 22, they think that $10,000 is a lot of money. And then when you see actual jurors, they're like millions of dollars in verdicts, right? Because they're thinking of like, this took years of your life and you had to come to court every day. You know, you had to do all this stuff. College students are terrible for damage awards. So when I look at her stuff, we investigated high school gender harassment and institutional betrayal by surveying 535 undergraduates, right? Whether institutional betrayal moderates the relationship between high school gender harassment and current trauma symptoms. Do you think that you might get a slightly different record from people who have never left an institutionalized school environment in their whole lives from the age of 6 until undergrad? You know, and most of these people are going to be straight from high school to undergrad. Can you really compare that to Lively 20 years into her adult working career, you know, getting to be an independent contractor and sign on for millions of dollars to these films?
Right.
It's just, I don't know. Not every study works.
Right. And you can find parallels, but we are not looking for parallels.
Right.
We are looking for someone who can speak to the issues in this case.
Right.
Like, we're not just saying this is analogous to, it's not enough.
Right.
Will you pin Lauren's comment?
Oh, yes.
It's starred. I don't have that ability for some reason. Lauren is going to teach me how to do it. Free Britney, although that turned out to be a huge failure. Okay.
She's in rehab right now, though. That's good.
They try to make me go to rehab. Okay.
Thank you, Deborah, for the super chat.
She basically says institutional trauma is one of these 12 things, which is kind of crazy because, okay. So not taking proactive steps to prevent this type of experience, creating an environment in which this type of experience seemed common or normal, creating an environment in which this type of experience seems more likely to occur, making it difficult to report the experience, responding inadequately to the experience if reported. I mean, I feel like an institution could do any one of these things and still not have, nobody's going to do everything perfectly.
Well, right? And also denying your experience in some way. What does that mean? Is that any pushback? Is that, you know?
Exactly.
Right.
Not creating an environment in which this type of experience seems common or normal. Some of the conversations that she refers to, right? Baldoni talking about him and his wife together, seems normal in a creative environment where you're talking about gratuitous sex scenes.
And also creating an environment where this type of experience is common or normal. You mean like improvising a kiss? He's doing it to her and then she's doing it to him. So are you creating the environment?
Right.
Yeah.
Perpetrators and their defenders may deny the behavior, attack the victim, confronting them, reverse the roles of victim and offender.
And again, this is predicated on him being a perpetrator.
And all I could think of was the pro-Lively subreddits that are just making stuff up about Baldoni, that are smearing, you know, other content creators, right? All I could think of was perpetrators and their defenders. You could easily flip this on his head and say that's Blake Lively and her defenders.
And like this sentence, this can occur when an actually guilty perpetrator assumes the role of falsely accused, attacks the victim's credibility, and accuses the victim of perpetrating a false accusation. In my opinion, academic honesty would mean going to this actually guilty phrase and explaining what makes such factually innocent person look different from a guilty person who is DARVOing. Because if this is your framework, you obviously have some sort of a way of distinguishing when am I seeing a perpetrator DARVOing and when am I seeing an innocent person just denying a false accusation? And there's nothing here.
Exactly. And she talks about that. She says that a part of the DARVO was his lawsuit and him defending himself in this lawsuit, to which I say,
that's true.
So then when somebody sues you and they think they're a victim, you just have to throw up your hands and go, you got me. How much money do you want?
Right. And this is kind of the thing I've seen Baldoni trapped in, right? Which is you're a harasser. And if you deny you're a harasser, you're an abuser.
Right.
So there's no,
there's no winning.
There's no winning.
Yeah. Yeah. So
also, just from this, right, these things, right, that never happened, you're remembering it incorrectly. Yeah. I don't see anywhere where Justin Baldoni has said any of these things.
Also, I highlighted, you should be apologizing to me. Because Blake, after months of terrorizing these people and playing move the goalpost and things are fine, things are not fine, sign this agreement, whatever, demands that he issue an apology to her.
Right. That she wrote.
To which I was like, it feels like had this DARVO expert had some more information, she might have looked twice. She also says that Blake relied on the institutions to protect her. But we know now with her PGA letter, that's also not true.
Right? She's the head of HR.
Over and over, Dr. Freyd says that Blake saw the best in the Wayfarer parties, that Blake was relying on them and believed them to be good people. And I'm like, there's direct contradictory evidence that she did not.
Right.
What are we doing here? My good doctor, that's not what happened. I'm so sorry. Okay. Polyvictimization. So she says it's a term to refer to a person's exposure to multiple types of victimization. I don't really know. Okay. So she then goes into the whole story, right? She was kissed, or her neck was nuzzled against. She doesn't say Justin kissed her without unscripted.
Sorry, there was nuzzling.
Justin nuzzled into her neck, to which I was like, Blake kissed him unscripted. That seems more egregious to me.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know. The multiple victimizations thing, again, I feel it's based on Blake's allegations. That's the other thing too. She's not seeing direct evidence of this stuff happening. It's all people describing the events.
And that's the thing. My opinions assume that the facts presented in documents I have received her as presented. And this is where it's like you put her on the stand and you destroy this instantaneously, because what she wasn't shown was anything that mitigates it. You might think, well, she doesn't have to. And technically they don't have to, but it's like you're putting her up there and it's going to be so obvious to a jury how they've cherry-picked the evidence to get her to say, well, of course this is how it is. Like, they didn't just take away evidence that things didn't happen. They took away any evidence that Blake had any power whatsoever on the set. So no wonder Freyd thinks the power dynamic is what it is.
Yeah. When an individual must trust someone with power over her and that powerful person betrays the individual, that is betrayal trauma. I understand that she's writing this about Blake, but it seems like she presupposes that the individual was someone with power over her. I struggled with that language, but again, these circumstances don't exist. We see in January of 2024, I will walk away if you don't sign this contract.
Mm-hmm.
She has so much power. It just, I don't think we can get to betrayal trauma. So yeah, Miss Lively's willingness to overlook this inappropriate comment reflected, we're talking about the circumcision, circumcision. Lively's willingness to overlook this inappropriate comment reflected both a maturity and understanding that sometimes good people say inappropriate things, but also planted the seeds for a kind of low-level betrayal blindness, where Miss Lively continued to give Mr. Baldoni the benefit of the doubt as he continued to make inappropriate remarks and violate Miss Lively's boundaries in a sexually inappropriate way. That did not happen. She never gave him the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Her private text before filming her saying, this guy is a clown. I fucking hate working with him.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. It's...
So...
I also I'm struggling to see this with a straight face, like in front of a jury. Like, you know, this circumcision comment is a low level betrayal blindness. Like,
you cannot say that. You do not know. This idea that you're not seeing things clearly as they are, this blindness, you do not know that was happening because she didn't conduct an interview with Blake.
right.
Which is like clinical diagnoses 101.
Right.
Right? We're not talking about someone after the fact, after they were unalived, right? We're talking about somebody that's alive that you could have interviewed and you didn't.
Right.
I just, throughout the production of the editing and promotion of the film, Miss Lively was Wayfarer's employee. No, she wasn't. Right?
Right.
She's relying on so much stuff. She throws Sony under the bus, which is not really relevant for 702, but I will say Blake really is burning it all down.
I mean, and it's any mention of Sony creates a lot of issue for the jury, I think, because they're going to say, are we supposed to think either they're going to think Sony must have it right. I really think one of the problems with this report, or even just the framing of Lively's whole case, is I think the jury is going to be like, I don't know what to think from Wayfarer. I don't know what to think from Lively. What does Sony have to say? Yeah. That's the relationship that she needs to preserve, because they're going to be like, well, what do you guys think? You guys are a big studio. You guys know the industry, you know?
Yeah.
And here she is saying, well, this is part of the institutional betrayal. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So she says Mr. Baldoni led the process into making significant changes to the script without her consent. I don't know that that's true. I think we have discussed intimacy coordinators at length throughout this case, and the intimacy coordinator seem to make it really clear that, like, no, I don't let people just make changes to the script. Right. She sets the boundaries. Adding nudity and other graphic sexual content that would have required Miss Lively to depict an on-screen orgasm, perform simulated oral sex, and perform a birth scene. That birth scene was already in there. I'd imagine most of that was already in there, and that actually was toned down at Blake's demand. That is my understanding. But again, all of this sounds really bad. It's a movie set. And Sony is in everybody's ear being like, tone up the heat. We want this to be like 50 Shades of whatever, right? Like,
right. I just noticed something I just want to point out. Miss Lively expressed her belief that after the protections for return to production, it would be a professional set and we're getting good work. Doesn't the fact that she's saying we're getting good work imply that this is present tense? She's not saying it would be that we're getting new work. Good work. It sounds like this quote is from a text message where she's saying it is a professional set and we are currently getting good work.
Yeah. I think that was to Jenny Slate.
Yeah, and then the framing of this is her belief that it would be that way. But then she quotes from a text message that says it actually is that way.
Yeah.
So even then, she's like pretending like, well, maybe it didn't happen. And it's like, no, she's texting that it happened. Great expert work. Wonderful.
It is my opinion that Miss Lively did keep giving Mr. Baldoni and Wayfarer the benefit of the doubt when she was calling them cultists.
Right. When she said he only got the rights to the film because of his cult.
Yeah, when she was calling them clowns. Right. Where in the evidence, and there's some of this too, right? This is completely unsupported. Every time she says Lively's giving them the benefit of the doubt, Lively's believing in them to change their behavior, there are no citations.
And this is just her saying, this is my opinion of what happened on a set that I was not on, where I didn't interview any of these people and I didn't actually see what happened. And even when she does quote a text message, it's in the wrong fucking tense.
Right. I believe that this was what was going on. We're not interested in your beliefs.
Right.
We are interested in, I took certain data and used a reliable scientific method, and based on those two things, I came up with this conclusion. Not, I think that this happened. I read between the lines of all these depositions, which is essentially what is happening. So, again, we need data to support the opinions. You don't just get to say, here's what I think happened. She really loves Mr. Heath showed her a video of his nude wife. It was a photograph to my knowledge, wasn't it?
It was the first second or two of the video. So it's kind of, it's in the middle ground.
Shown Miss Lively a video of his nude wife in a tub in connection with the birth of their child. That is she uses really passive, strange language throughout this portion.
Yeah.
She says later, Wayfarer was asked to issue an apology. That sounds really passive. It was demanded by Blake Lively that they issue an apology of her choosing with her language.
And her husband was there.
And her husband demanded it, right? So she uses passive language when it's beneficial to Lively, which you can't really get. I mean, it's so ticky-tacky, right? I'm ripping it apart.
Right.
Here, you're not going to say that in front of a judge, but there is a lot of like, this is what advocacy looks like.
Right.
And so what you do when you so say the judge says, nope, I'm letting this person come in. Here's how you start questioning a witness on the stand. You say, you've been hired by the plaintiff to testify on her behalf. And you're making $800 an hour for that testimony. Is that right? And you're not here as an advocate. No. You're here as an expert in the field of clinical research. And you would agree with me that if your expertise and your testimony strays into advocacy, this jury should disregard your testimony. Right? Because you're not allowed to advocate. That is a part of the rule. And so you make it really clear. If you're straying into advocacy, I can ask this jury to disregard, right? And what's she going to do? No, they can totally believe me. Okay, now you sound dumb. Let's go.
Right.
So that's where you really get into ripping apart. And that's your belief, right? You actually can't cite. Your report doesn't cite to any of the evidence to say that you believe she was giving Wayfarer the benefit of the doubt. That's something you came up with. And you go through all of this, you back her into corners, you question her, and then at the end you say, and it's still your testimony here today that you're not advocating for the plaintiff?
Right.
And she goes, no, I'm not. And you go, yeah, no further questions.
Right. I don't think this is getting admitted.
I don't either. From the get, when we talked about it the first time, I was like, this is getting kicked.
I did want to point out something in the comments where somebody said, well, she's got this amazing CV. This is not a hard and fast rule. This is simply my perspective from my own academic research. When you are looking at someone and you see endless citations on which they are first author, that is typically representative that someone has contributed some sort of data set or some sort of theory to a field, and then therefore they're being credited over and over again for that contribution, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing all of, like, it's because it's relying on that framework. And my source for this is that I have about 40 publications that I've never gone near because I contributed data to a field that gets, and it's a set of, it's information that other authors then hugely rely on. So they tend to include me as an author.
And that bolsters this methodology is relatively accepted in the scientific community, right?
Right.
She puts that in there to show other people are citing to me because this is a generally accepted term within my community. Right. And I'm not trying to rip apart this expert.
Right.
In the larger context of what she's contributed. I think these terms are important. I also see these terms get misused by abusers all the time.
Right.
So it's not particularly helpful to go, oh, DARVO. Okay, based on what?
Right. You have to have some sort of.
Yeah. So, it makes sense with college students where they feel betrayed by their college because it's a huge deal that many college students have reported a rape and nothing has been done.
Exactly.
Their abuser isn't even moved to a new dorm, right? So they still have to see him day after day. That's the kind of institutional betrayal she's talking about. And she's contorting it to advocate for Blake Lively here.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because it's going to be a stain on her resume because now content like this exists, right?
Well, yeah, and it just doesn't, there are just some studies, like every damage award study that I've ever done, where it's just, you don't get good data on college kids because like they don't have the resources of adulthood. They don't know what they can do to go to the cops. They're going to say, well, I didn't know that was an option. They're reliant on their parents. They're reliant on institutions to protect them. A college student doesn't have any experience. Their entire adulthood has likely been in college. So they are trusting the administration to make these kinds of to protect them, to look after them, and in some ways to teach them about how the world is, right? So if they say we're not moving a rapist to another dorm, that person is going to grow up thinking this is what the world is like. That doesn't apply to a 36-year-old, 37-year-old woman on a film set who's negotiating her own return to work because she believes that the information, that the situation she's been in is not normal to the industry. It sounds like she's got a lot of support and a lot of ability.
She's writing her own scenes and getting the most famous people in Hollywood to say, you have to adopt this scene because it's really good.
Right.
She's getting her most famous best friend. I mean, Taylor Swift at this time is Eras Tour level fame.
Right.
Not showgirl level fame.
Right.
Taylor Swift is on top of the world. I noted that in her attack portion, they would retaliate. So they're attacking Blake by becoming irritated, cold, and uncollaborative. That is Lively's feelings about it. That is not an attack. And honestly, if you tell someone this thing you did made me feel uncomfortable, it's actually completely normal for the person to kind of get uncomfortable. Nobody likes to be wrong. Your ego,
this is the thing.
I don't care how woke you are, how emotionally mature you are. Your ego a little bit is going to be like, I didn't like the way that felt.
And also, I don't like how comfy cozy we all are, right? I don't like the hugging. I don't like the friendliness. I don't think we need to be all up in each other's business. But also, I still demand that you act the same, and I still demand that you come across the same way to me. What does that even look like?
Right. And becoming irritated okay, fine. Irritated is not an attack. Cold and uncollaborative. What does that look? Uncollaborative how?
Right.
And that's where you interview someone to be like, what does that mean to you? What did that look like?
Right.
So that she could further say, while it was Blake's opinion that these things happened, she couldn't give me any examples of that.
Right.
Right? She's just listing stuff off that Blake listed herself. So the text to his friend attacking Miss Lively, I don't really buy into that. I think people should be able to, text your friends.
This is another thing that I think a jury is going to notice. So when he's texting his friends, like when she's texting her or telling Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, he's in a cult. He thinks he's the prophet of a new religion. He only had the rights to the film because the cult was funding the thing. When he's texting his friends, it's pray for me.
Yeah.
He doesn't say anything bad about her. He doesn't make anything up about her. He just says, I need your guys' support.
Yeah.
So even in private conversations or conversations that he reasonably thought were private, he's just saying, this is what I need, not any, he's not trying to, obviously it is, having the effect of saying something bad about her, but it's not.
It's his prayer group.
Yeah.
It's his 3 best friends and his dad.
Yeah.
Like, he's not trying to sway Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. He's not trying to sway Taylor Swift. He's not trying to sway the Producers Guild.
Right.
He's just asking for prayers from his prayer group, which is absolutely normal.
Right.
And people attacked him for it when it came out, and I damn near lost my mind.
And I mean, Zane says this, for Blake, comfort is getting her way when she wants it with 0 pushback. I have no clue how you get over this perception if you're her attorneys.
Yeah.
The number of times that she says, I'm uncomfortable and I feel unsafe. And the problem is I didn't like how I didn't get control over something.
Yeah. And the timing is going to be the timeline in this case is going to be so essential.
Yeah.
Right? She asked for this thing. We said no. Now we're getting sexual harassment accusations. She asked for this thing. We said no. Now we're sitting in a separate room for the premiere. She asked for this thing. Right?
Right.
All along the way, I think that has to be the story, is she's making demands, we are not giving them to her, and when we don't give them to her, she threatens us.
Right.
With give me what I want or else. So she's I think we've kind of covered the big gaping flaws that make it hard to run it through the 702 Daubert standards, right? Is there anything else that really stood out to you?
What time is that? You know, it's, I think the denying is, there's no room for, there's no like putting this in any sort of a context, right? So saying like the events were wrong and things were taken completely out of context. The words creepy and abuse were used in reference to me and my behavior. Okay, like, yeah, he said this, but let's go back up to these DARVO things, because when I see these DARVO things, what's her 18 things? Okay, like, you know, the short for DARS is 3 elements of DARVO. You can tell from the way these are phrased that this is what the abuser is saying to the victim. So I'm supposed to think that the things that Baldoni is saying to his friends is the same as what he's saying to the victim. There is no conversation where Justin Baldoni told Blake any of these things. You're a liar, you're acting crazy, you need help, you're just trying to manipulate me. His opinions to other people in text messages that she is not aware of are not part of the subjective. It's the same thing with the kind of with the employment thing, right? You can't be sexually harassed by conduct you're not aware of. And you can't be abused by his opinions of your conduct to his friends, right? Like, this is, all of these are I can't believe you're trying to make this my fault. And then it's like, okay, so he's texting his friends and saying, well, she's mischaracterizing me. So he's not even allowed to deny it to other people?
Right. Or, you know, reach out to other people and say, this is what she thinks about me. Am I really this guy? I mean, I know he's not saying it like that, but that's what our friendships are for.
Right. You know,
to come to your friends and be like, somebody just called me a raging jerk.
Right. You're not supposed to, you know, it's what, you know, and the thing is, if Lively says, fuck this guy, I don't like this piece of shit, I don't think that's abuse either. If she's lying about him being in a cult, we have a kind of different problem, right? If she's saying he only has the rights to the film because the cult is paying for it, now we have kind of a statement of fact, right? That's kind of defamatory. But if she's texting him and saying, I don't like him, it's also, I think, not abuse, right? But it does show how she feels, right? But then it's like, Wayfarer, Sony, and production respectfully acknowledge that your client has concerns. I'm sorry, is this a DARVO tactic?
Right.
What am I, you know? And then he's saying, well, Mr. Baldoni texted his friends furthering his attack on her character. An attack, she's suffering from abuse without having to know that this even happened. It's like a lot of the abuse that Lively has suffered is the result of her going through Discovery. Right? Like the terrorist stuff, all of her reputational harm is post lawsuit. Like this lawsuit is her damages, right? Yeah. But you're the one who fucking sued, girl.
Right. You brought us here. Yeah, the other thing I do want to point out is they say, after December 2024, defendants with and through its counsel continued the DARVO by filing multiple lawsuits against Miss Lively and others in 3 jurisdictions for hundreds of millions of dollars each. Right. And they say Wayfarer Studios versus Lively et al., Wayfarer et al. Versus New York Times. How is them suing New York Times attacking Blake Lively? And then Jed Wallace versus Lively.
Right.
Which is not about the abuse at all, but him saying, I actually wasn't sued, so why was I in the New York Times?
Right.
That's defamation, right? So she stretches it even by saying this very case is DARVO, and they filed multiple lawsuits, and gasp. And it's like, no, they didn't. Not against her.
Right. And also, I mean, so Wayfarer attempted to make themselves the victims. They claim that Lively was responsible for her and the cast not participating in marketing or promotion of the film alongside Baldoni. I mean, that factually happened. I don't think that's them making themselves the victim. I think that's them describing what happened.
Right.
Right. It's just, it's like, how dare you say things that are upsetting but true, right?
Right.
You know, and then it's expected for, I it's expected for a victim of betrayal, trauma, institutional betrayal, and DARVO to not want to further subject herself to trauma at the hands of the same individuals or institutions. I don't usually say this in cases of like sexual harassment or when there's some sort of like stuff being abused, but there is a point where a jury is going to say, for fuck's sake, like where you're just going to lose everything that they're saying because they're like the absolute trauma of being asked to do your job, the absolute trauma of being told that you can't have your way on something.
Yeah.
You know?
The absolute trauma that somebody nuzzled into your neck when 2 days ago you kissed him unscripted.
Right. I can't believe that they're saying the reason they didn't get to promote the film is because you said they couldn't, when the reason that they couldn't promote the film is actually because you said they couldn't. They're
Right.
just, that's so abusive that they're saying that. The jury, there's just, this is, Blake, settle.
Yeah.
Like, figure something out.
Yeah.
So, or not this. This is not the way.
This is not the way.
For $100 million, Britt and I will give you a trial strategy.
Yeah, the DARVO expert did not use the PGA letter on the report, and I think that's huge.
Yeah.
I think that Blake wants to keep stuff like that out because it shows, again, behind all of the opinions that come up in this report, there's power dynamics. She starts with, well, Justin Baldoni is a principal of the Wayfarer Corporation and he's a director of the film and, you know, he's in charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we all know that he wasn't. Like, he was
right.
not in charge. Like, even Taylor Swift, welcome to Hollywood, Justin. Now that,
Right.
now that you've used my song, you have no more control. Like, just Blake all along the way is showing us that she had the power and the control. And you cannot say, I'm in charge. You're a clown. I don't respect you. I have all the power here. I have all the connections. I have all the money. I have all the fame. Oh no, I'm feeling harassed. Like, that's not how that goes.
Right.
That's how DARVO goes, actually.
It's a disaster. Ladybug has said, I want Blake to lose in front of a jury, otherwise she will never think she has made any bad claims. Blake is going to be saying that this was a DARVO thing and that everybody else but her has responsibility until she dies. Just so we're clear.
She will be making documentaries.
Yes.
She will be pounding this, and there will be people out there who will believe her.
Yes.
Over the evidence, over a jury, over, assuming a jury finds for Wayfarer. Like, she will never accept fault. And this will be her victimhood calling card for the rest of her life.
I mean, this is one of the things I joked like early on in all of this was they're going to be listed in each other's obituaries, right? Like, this is going to be one of the noteworthy things that she and Baldoni have done. And that's what this is. She will be doing this. She will be talking about this in 20 years. I'm very confident. I don't think there's ever going to be a point where she won't be trying to convince at least some people. She may go away for a couple of years after the trial, and then she will come back with a documentary called Lights, Call to Action, like she said she was going to make. And she will want to rehash all of this again. And then they have to make a decision. If we sue her, we go through all of this again. And if we ignore it, we'll see what happens. But,
So first off, as far as how I think the court is going to find, so you have law, right? You have federal law, you have state law, you have regulations, which is like administrative agencies, right? So we make laws and then we give the executive branch the ability to enforce and promulgate those laws. And they make regulations on how to do that, which are like little mini rules under the law. You have court rules. So the court will say, here's how we generally want things to go, right? Like these letter motions to the judge. Normally those are on pleading paper. This judge has said, I want them via letter. And then you have the law of the case. And the law of this case is that she is not going to testify on her mental health beyond garden variety distress. So because the law of this case, based on the judge's order, is that we are not introducing evidence of emotional and physical distress, I think this pisses him off. Right? The fact that we even have to argue about this because you said you weren't going to do this. So that is where Wayfarer starts. And I think that's a smart thing to do because that is very strong. Judge, you said, and we stipulated. And now here we are asking to keep a doctor who is opining about risks of physical health and mental health and substance abuse without any sort of clinical diagnosis. Don't let her get on the stand and say those things because we agreed that wouldn't happen. And if she does, we have the right to get her evaluated with her own expert.
Right. So just to go back to Lyman's order on the garden variety. So they had this conversation. They wanted to compel, Wayfarer wanted to compel medical records. Lively had said, this happened back June 25. Lively said, I don't want to do this. Lively is going to withdraw those claims. There was a back and forth about with prejudice or without prejudice that honestly made zero sense to me because I don't, is she saying she's going to file them again in another court, I guess? But at any rate, what he said is,
I think she wanted without prejudice so she could get an expert like this, right, and then rebring those claims before. Yeah.
Okay. So she said the court, so basically we don't need to do the motion to compel. She's saying she's going to withdraw it. The parties will stipulate to whether the dismissal is with or without prejudice. She did eventually stipulate to it being with prejudice. So, for avoidance of doubt, if the claims are not dismissed, the court will preclude Lively from offering any evidence of emotional distress. So what that means is if you are refusing to provide your medical records, you cannot refer to things for your emotional distress. That last sentence is really clumsily worded from him, from avoidance of doubt, if the claims are not dismissed. But what he's saying is, if you're not going to put forward your medical records, you're not going to be able to make the argument without them. So you'll just lose on those 10th and 11th claims, is what he's saying in that last sentence. So because she withdrew them, she's still not able to put forward evidence of emotional distress other than just, I was sort of generally sad.
Yeah.
So.
The second thing Wayfarer drives home is that her opinions were formed without interviewing Lively, reviewing her medical records, conducting clinical tests, or speaking with her medical providers is almost pure ipsy dixit. We have seen that so often in this case.
Yes.
And palpably unreliable. And finally, that it's based on her own interpretation of documents and testimony, right? So what they're driving home is this is not the accepted method to make the opinions that she makes. Typically, when we're determining who's a perpetrator and who's using DARVO, we go through clinical diagnoses. Typically, when we say somebody is at risk for severe mental health problems, we look at their medical records.
Right.
So those are speaking to the Daubert standards. Yeah. It's ipsy dixit is what Latin for according to the speaker.
Yeah,
just upon the speaker's word or something.
Yeah, trust me, bro.
Yeah, trust me, bro is the correct.
Heskey said, "Did anyone see the headline regarding Blake and the Van Zandt thing?" No. Can you post it in the chat? Sorry, go ahead.
Who's the publication?
Yeah,
I did like this line where they say, in addition to this not quite diagnosis.
Right.
Which is, I think, a really clever way. I forget who wrote this. I think it was Bach and Shapiro. Very great writers. I wish I could be half as good as them, to be honest.
Whoever brought them on, get a bonus. No notes. You guys need a bonus. Yeah. You need a vacation home. You need a vacation.
So I don't see this one. This pretty squarely, for many, many reasons, doesn't seem to pass the smell test.
Right.
In my opinion, you never know what a judge will do, but I think the fact that she withdrew these claims and is now trying to backdoor this evidence,
right,
and this entire expert opinion just presupposes that she was a victim,
right,
which is not what you do.
I think this kind of DARVO analysis would only be relevant for an emotional distress claim for intentional or negligent infliction.
If we had medical records,
yeah,
and she was able to interview her, and she was the the diagnosing expert for plaintiff, we're having a different conversation.
Right. Okay, I am going to try and answer this because I think this is kind of getting to the jury thing, and getting to kind of the credibility, but I'm also going to try to be careful about how I answer this. Do we actually think that Blake Lively had emotional distress and went to therapy or sought any other help? Because I think that's why she dropped those claims. I know that this is, obviously, I do not know this person, right? I do not know her. I do not have the ability to diagnose anything. I don't have any knowledge of her. To me, as a subjective, as a lay person reading, her tweets or, text messages or whatever, I think that it's possible that she has pre-existing mental health conditions, that she is afraid of putting on the docket, first of all, because it is personal and it's adding to the media circus around this, and she doesn't necessarily want to put herself out there, and I think that's valid. I think it's a good choice. And also because of kind of what Jennifer Freyd is testifying to, because the question becomes, well, how much of your pre-existing mental health conditions are causing this? And I think this creates a dilemma when her mental health is not at issue, but there's reason to believe that there is a kind of pre-existing mental health issue. I think people on a jury are going to see some of these patterns of behavior, and they're going to wonder if her mental health is at issue. I've said before that I think that call that happened between Sean Levy and Justin Baldoni at the beginning of filming about how to handle Blake may have had something to do with that, like information about her personality, information about how she behaves. There's also just like stuff about how she is on other film sets and how other people have described her that I think comes for her mental health. And so, and even just stuff that I think it crosses people's minds, like she doesn't drink. And is that because when you take certain types of medication, you can't drink? So this is one of those things that I think, unfortunately, a witness who is divulging their poor reputation, all of their text messages over the course of years, right? And have all these people that seem to be having conversations about her and how best to support her, and kind of even stuff like Justin being, like, I want to make sure we come at this from a sensitive place, I think gives the impression to a jury that there is an issue of mental stability there. And that's not something anyone in this case can speak to, but it is something that is in the background that her side is going to have to figure out how to deal with.
And potentially exacerbated with postpartum.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, she's talking a lot about how she's struggling post-baby in a way that, to me, as a person who has never had children, and many of my friends have never had children.
Right.
But it does seem like she's struggling post-baby, whether that's postpartum depression or just normal depression, I don't know.
Right.
There are some things there. I will say there's a text or an exchange communication of some sort, and it's in this report between her and Josh Greenstein about how Blake was calling him distraught about the online, the media circus around this. And I will say, this is not a defense of Blake Lively's past behavior, because you all know I agree that the Plantation Wedding and the Preserve clothing line are abhorrent. And it is never easy to have so many people looking at you with such negativity, even if you deserve it, whatever that means, even if you brought it onto yourself. It is never easy to have millions of people making content that's negative about you.
Right.
Again, not an excuse of her behavior, but my hope is that she did go to therapy.
Yeah.
Based on that, like, everyone deserves to have support, even when you're a complete monster.
Yeah.
Right? That we want to live in a society actually where the monsters do go to therapy. So I hope that she did.
Yeah,
I hope that she does.
I just pulled up the quote. Mr. Greenstein recalled a phone call with Miss Lively that he described as someone who is going through severe trauma, is all I can describe, almost hyperventilating, crying, incredibly upset, inconsolable, I would say. and trauma is his word. So it's, and you got to think in the moment, yes, it turned out to be a few weeks of bad press and it kind of died down, but she had no way of knowing that was how that was going to play out, and then you've got stuff like you've got the businesses that are getting vendors that are concerned and Blake Brown sales go down, and I also think part of the reason why this whole lawsuit started is because I think that between the success of It Ends With Us and the success of the hair care line, I think that she was planning to have her Eras Tour-esque A-list. Like, I think she had banked on this being the beginning of her true A-list career on her own.
Yeah.
And then this just
no longer Taylor Swift's best friend, no longer
right.
Ryan Reynolds' wife, Blake Lively.
Right. And then this follows you, And so Daphne said, well, now you are making me feel a little bad for her. I don't want to feel bad for her. You don't need to feel bad for her, but I think if you're going to think like an attorney, you should always kind of, empathy is a skill. Narcissists have empathy, right? Like people who are with narcissistic personality disorder have a kind of empathy, right? Because you have to be able to understand people to manipulate them. So
I was just going to say, you want to be able to actually get into their psyche to understand what you're dealing with on the stand.
Yeah. I mean,
I also don't think it's helpful to just villainize her.
Yeah.
And say she's evil and that's it. I don't think that's helpful. A lot of the time we are all prone to doing it. I have done it many a time, right? So that doesn't mean I'm pointing fingers at anybody. If anything, it's this, right? But it isn't really helpful to say she's evil and that's all it is, because there are many other people out there like her, equally as willing to do some form of similar damage. And if we look at it, we can better address it.
Yeah.
But not looking at it looks like she's bad, let's move on. She's evil, let's move on, right?
Yeah.
Trying to humanize it, trying to empathize with it, not agreeing with it.
But just understanding
right?
where it comes from.
Exactly.
Right.
My favorite saying, never try to ruin a person's life with a lie when yours can be ruined by the truth. She had no regard for other people's privacy, so it's hard to have empathy for her. I think that's fair too. I think, it seems like there's a lot of ego wrapped up into how we got here. She really needed this to be somebody else's fault. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of the evidence shows that it isn't somebody else's fault. I mean, who knows? Maybe Jed Wallace does have bots and they were bolstering all of these videos and telling the algorithm, hey, people are enjoying negative content about Blake Lively, which makes other people want to make negative content about Blake Lively, which, that gets bolstered and it all seems bigger. Who knows? Right. I've not seen a shred of evidence that that's what happened, though. And I've seen a lot of evidence that that's not what happened.
And if you're following my channel, how many months was I saying I can't wait to argue Blake Lively's evidence? I was so like, you guys are going to regret this. You guys are going to be like, now what? Because I'm gonna defend Lively, and I'm gonna be like, ha ha ha, this is why I didn't pick sides, right? Mm-hmm. And then the evidence did not materialize, and so I mean, this is something I keep thinking about, the credibility issue for Blake, where there's so many things where she told different people different things based on the reaction I think she wanted to get. And I think part of her problem in a weird way is that when she says like, this is something regular women can relate to, I actually don't disagree, in the sense that I think what the jury's going to do, they're going to have regular jobs and they're going to be thinking of this and trying to kind of analyze it through the lens of a regular work environment. And most people in a work environment have had a coworker who isn't doing well performance-wise and decides to say like, this is happening because of my gender, this is happening because they don't like me. They're kind of, they're not being fully honest with themselves about what some of the issues are. And so, this is a dynamic people are going to be familiar with. Most people in an office have had somebody who's not doing well or who's having conflict try to drag them into that conflict. Yeah. Right. And so what I think is, you've got all these people on the set that I think are coming forward that were initially supporting Blake. And now they're in their deposition and they're like, look, okay, here's what I told them. Right. Here's what I said. But I'm not enthused about it. But it's like, this is what a lot of people were doing in an office. Right. If you're in an office and your coworker, you had, Bob told you I like your shirt one day, and you were like, fuck off, Bob. And then your coworker says, Bob has been sexually harassing me, and he cornered me in the copy room, and he said that I was super hot and I needed to date him. You're going to be like, let's go to HR. I'm going to tell them what Bob said about me. You're going to tell them what Bob said about you, and we're going to take this motherfucker down. Yeah. And then later on, okay, Bob wasn't in the copy, and he's like, okay, well, I said this because I was trying to be helpful. I said this because I thought she needed the support. I was doing it for Blake. I wasn't doing it against Justin.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that a lot of this, fuck off, Bob. Yeah, I mean, some of these dynamics and these interpersonal dynamics are going to be very, very relatable in a weird way.
Yeah. Yeah, and you really, a good lawyer, and these are very good lawyers.
Yeah.
On both sides. They're capable.
Yeah. Right?
They're smart people. How they're using that smart is, but, you know, they're going to instruct the jury too. This is not a regular work set.
Right.
This is a movie set. So, you know, the context really matters. So they're really going to drive home like that. We're not just looking at this of what does your workplace look like. We're looking at this of what does a movie set look like.
Right.
And this is what a movie set looks like. So even though they are going to do exactly that, they're going to say, well, you know, I've had this situation. They're going to humanize it and put it in the context of their own experiences. Yeah. And also being like, yeah, but I don't work on a movie set, so.
Yeah, you know. And then it's going to turn into, it kind of can be the worst of both worlds, because they're going to be like, well, that would explain why everybody was so enthusiastic about going after her or supporting her. And now they're kind of, yeah, there was an issue on the set and I didn't love it, but it's fine. And it was handled. You know, I'm going to shout out a YouTube video. It's 4 hours long, though. I cannot fathom looking at a project someone worked on for 5 years and immediately thinking, you don't deserve that, but I do, so I'll just take it. There is a YouTuber, H-Bomber guy, who did a 4-hour video on YouTube plagiarism that I've seen like 30 times. It's amazing. And what he does is he kind of takes down, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a YouTuber that was on here for several years. And he basically plagiarized all his content from different YouTubers. And it was incredibly interesting because it was mostly like LGBT content. And so he was not even necessarily changing the pronouns of stuff. So it didn't apply to him. Just plagiarizing people's life stories and life experiences and working them into his videos. And he did this for years and made a ton of money off of YouTube doing this. And I would hugely recommend this because you kind of get a sense of like what that psyche is, to look at somebody's life, look at somebody's life story, and just said, I'm going to take that and I'm going to tell it better than you can, you know?
Yeah. You're not a colleague, you're a colonizer. Yeah. You see me. Katie sent us a video for a funny.
Oh, let's see.
Yeah, you know, I think if she gets a couple of black women on this jury, she's done.
She's done.
Because overwhelmingly black women have said that white women act a certain way. They are power hungry in a way that is insidious and manipulative and dangerous.
They'd rather work with white men than white women, right?
Yeah. And overwhelmingly. So a couple of people made videos and the entire comment section. So I actually shouted out, I think it's like one of my most liked videos, but I talked about how White Woman Whisperer made this video saying, okay, now we've done man versus bear, black women. Who do you prefer in the conference room? You're alone.
Yeah.
White man, white woman. And in my comment section, it was just hundreds of thousands of comments. White man, white man, white man. People telling like their personal anecdotes. I tried to read every single one of them because I was like, yeah, I wasn't surprised at all. When she asked that, I was like, oh, it's going to be white man.
Right. It's
because we love to be like, hey, sister, when it works for us.
Right. And then there's this. this sort of,
The second our power is threatened, no
right.
longer a sisterhood. So
I mean, yeah, I don't know how you get past the insufferability part. And she has an uncanny ability to piss people off within 2 minutes of meeting them.
mm-hmm.
I don't know what you do with that. I've never seen somebody who's more less likable, but still so like confident in how they present. So we'll see if that. I think she
word
just
salad, all of that. And keep in mind too, 99, maybe 98% of times, the first person called to testify is the plaintiff, because you want to get them up there to tell their story, to give the jury context.
Right.
And so you have Blake Lively as the first witness. Now they may choose to do something different. You're not bound to that, but it gets really confusing if you're calling in Ange Giannetti or Josh Greenstein first, and he's telling the story. Meanwhile, plaintiff, like the jury is like, who is this? Why am I hearing this from them? Why am I not hearing it from her?
You'd want her first, I would think, because the risk you run if you have her last is like all these people saying these things, and then now she has to make them all discredited. And jurors are already going to be like, I like this person, I don't like this person. You know, they're going to have their views, and then she's got to come up and discredit a lot of people. It's
But she's coming up on direct exam, which is open-ended questions.
Right.
It's not yes and no answers. It's, Miss Lively, tell us what your experience was like. And then she goes off on her word salad diatribe. I would bet money. Let's do a bingo. Somebody will have to call it out for us. But I would bet money the witness has drifted into a narrative objection is coming for her direct exam.
So somebody asked, are they allowed to have Blake as the first witness and then have her back in the stand as their last witness? They can't call her twice, right?
You get a redirect.
Okay. Do you have to do the redirect right after?
You get a rebuttal case.
Okay.
Because the Wayfarer parties put up their defense, and then because you're plaintiff, you get last word.
Okay.
In the same way prosecution does, right? Prosecution gets the last word.
So, okay. So it'll go plaintiff, all their stuff, defense, all their stuff, then Blake.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Blake can come back up and, Miss Lively, you were in the courtroom when you heard Mr. Baldoni say that you improvised a kiss. Did you? Tell us about that. What led to those circumstances? Oh, well, he made me. Right? I mean, she's going to get up on the stand and say what she's going to say, but.
So I've heard this. This is the only time I'm ever going to bring up this case, but I've heard that in the Amber Heard Johnny Depp lawsuit, Amber Heard mentioned something about medical issues, and that made some of this medical record stuff kind of come in where I think there had been an in limine motion. And it was something in the opening arguments, her attorney made a reference to something that they themselves had kept out in an in limine motion. So I guess here's a question. And I would normally say, well, that's ridiculous. That'll never happen. But this would be the case that keeps on giving. If Lively says, this whole smear campaign was so bad that I actively contemplated suicide, what does that open up? I mean, they can move to strike.
So it is my understanding that they do not have her medical records.
Right.
Right? So in the Amber Heard case, I think she had given over her medical records, but they wanted those excluded.
Right.
But then she brought it up and kicked the door down so then they could bring it in. Right?
Right.
Here, Blake withdrew her claims before they had the chance to move for mental health evaluations.
Right.
Before they had the chance to see her medical records. So I think what you do is you move to strike. I don't know. I mean, if it sways a jury so much that they're that's hundreds of thousands of dollars for her, she can testify to whatever she wants to, though. She could
say, I was self-harming.
Here's how distressed I was. And I don't know if they cap. Some states cap the type of damages you can get depending on the category. So punitive damages only are so much.
Yeah.
I don't know I don't think they cap them in federal court.
I
But
mean,
what you
this is kind of the thing. The jury could never unhear those words. I'm not saying
exactly.
this would be a winning strategy for her. In fact, I think it could backfire very quickly. But I do wonder if it's something that she would consider.
I think that she will get on the stand and she will say, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't be a mother to my children, I was distressed, I was sobbing every single. I think we get testimony that that was real,
So
that
tenor of
that was her experience.
yeah, like can she say she was stressed? She can say what she wants, but I normally they wouldn't you wouldn't want to oversell it. But given that it's digital violence and abuse, given that Instagram statement, do you want to go over that Instagram statement? Or did you guys do that on live? I can't remember already. Her
The
Instagram.
digital violence one?
Yeah.
I made a video about that
Okay.
portion, but I didn't go over it.
I mean, just the like, this is abuse. This is the physical pain of
Mhm.
digital violence. So I was
I think we'll
thinking,
get something close to that.
yeah,
And I think if you get a damages award that's in the $200,000 range, you ask the judge to knock that down or you appeal it. And you say, based on the testimony alone, the jury made an unreasonable decision. It's a tough ask because the jury was the one sitting in the room and the
right, yeah,
Court of Appeals really is going to hold it to a higher standard because they're like, we're looking at transcripts, we were not there.
yeah. You mentioned, okay, so I just going back to that statement because there was something that you and LGA and NAG said that I wanted more information on, which is admitting that as evidence that her story is changing. What, how would you present that?
I would use it to impeach her because she likely testified to something entirely different in her deposition, right? And so you back her into a corner based on what her deposition was and her deposition questions, and then you say, but that changed over time, right? Or you like, but that isn't the case anymore now, is it, Miss Lively? Now you're worried about this.
Right.
Over here, you were saying you couldn't eat and sleep because of the sexual harassment. Now you're saying it was the digital violence.
Okay, okay.
Which is it, right? So
Right.
you use it to impeach her. The other thing you could do is she's going to go out and talk about how they did a smear campaign, and you're going to get up and say she is a moving target. It is this one day, it is this the next day, right? So you try to get testimony to show that she's just all over the map and that she's not firmly grounded in reality, right? So you
Yeah.
could kind of go through that statement and be like, you had 10 claims dismissed and you posted this online, you know, and then you argue in closing, we never know which version of her we're going to get. We never know which version of the story we're going to get. We had to hire crisis PR because she behaves like this.
Right.
Where everything is the most detrimental thing that could ever happen to a person. Trolls were trolling. That's what the
Right.
online world does. Anyone who's been online knows. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to go too hard, especially with your initial cross, right? On that first cross examination, you want to be gentle. You want a woman to cross her. It'll be interesting if Friedman decides to do it. I think that would be a huge mistake. I think Bacher Shapiro should do it.
Garofalo? Box a
Garofalo
man.
could.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I meant
Shapiro.
Garofalo. I was like Ellen Bach.
Um,
My name blindness strikes again.
it depends on how she came across in her deposition. If she was super, super nasty to Brian Friedman, this is one of those things where the jury not knowing the history is going to be funny, because I think if Friedman asks her any questions, or she's going to be, or if he cross examines Ryan Reynolds, if Ryan gets called as a witness, I think you're going to see an attitude, and the jury is going to be like, where the hell is this coming from?
Keep in mind, Friedman has this way. He's a very small stature man.
Yeah.
And the interview he did where he was like, these guys are changing me. He has a way of being soft.
Yeah.
That if he's soft and she's snarky, that also looks bad, because then you can say, like, she's not afraid of men.
Yeah, yeah. And it creates a thing of like, there's just nothing that a man could do right in her eyes, right? Like, imagine if he gives her those text messages where she's texting Jenny Slate and saying, no, it's okay that you made that joke. It wasn't okay for Justin to laugh at it. You know? Like,
Yeah.
where it's like, so you just have an issue with men, or like you brought up Adam Monsheen being friends with Justin Baldoni, and you said that it was like problematic that he hired his friend to be the OBGYN, but you're not saying he did anything. You're not saying that there was any conduct. You just don't like that they're friends with each other. So
Right.
you just don't like people because of who they know and who they're connected to.
Right.
And then she gets all, with Friedman. And it's like, well, yeah, she doesn't like him because he's his lawyer.
It's a gamble either way. Right. It's a
Right.
gamble to have Friedman do it. It's a gamble to have one of the women do it, because maybe Blake is a little more soft and demure. Although there's nothing a white woman who hates women hates more than a woman cross-examining her.
True. True.
Oh my God. I think I've told this story probably a million times, but I had a woman just snarky as hell. Just, you wouldn't understand. I mean, talking over me while I was making objections, like,
Could you imagine? Could you imagine Blake saying you wouldn't understand? And then they pull up the comments about her doing this for all women.
yeah, like getting
Okay.
snarky, getting like, ugh, how would you know? Like, ugh, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because Blake is the toxic masculine, and she thinks she's better than other women, and she thinks she's in charge, and she thinks other women are stupid, or so it seems.
Whitney, I just want to say thank you for this comment. This gives me hope for myself.
Oh, thank you. I'm actually a fucking monster at work. Not because I have power hungry, because I just hate work.
I have photons. This is something I'm going to go tell the attorneys that I work with. You need a woman because blonde privileged women are only afraid of each other. I was talking to Katie about Alex Cooper and Alex Earl because I don't know who they are, and I'm trying to figure out why they
I
don't
thought
like
they
each
were
other.
the same person.
They're very similar looking, and doesn't help that they're both named Alex. They're different women. I thought Call Her Daddy was a parenting podcast. That
I love that for you.
Yeah, I was like, oh, it's like because she's a single mom, so she's also the dad. That was where my fucking brain has been this whole time.
Sure. Call Her Daddy actually is a single mom podcast.
It's
It's adorable.
I just was like, oh, I don't watch parenting stuff. So yeah, so I was asking Katie about this, and this is kind of an interesting thing. Blonde privileged women are maybe only that's the only. Yeah, I don't know pop culture. I don't know who the fuck Taylor Swift is. What is even Taylor Swift?
What's a Swift?
Speaking
What
of
is a
which,
Swiftie?
I feel like we need to make a bet, and then if you lose, I can make you listen to Life of a Showgirl.
She sent me a portion of a song today, and I was so angry.
I
I was
just
so furious that somebody was like, yeah, Max Martin and Shellback were like, put our name on that. She's
they were
done.
like, give us the money. The check cleared.
That's true.
Um,
I could not pick either Alex or Alex in a lineup. Genuinely thought they were the same person. I was heartened. I was comforted by the many of their comments in the comment section. I think Saran
yeah.
did a video, and everybody else was like, I genuinely thought these were the same people. And I was like, okay, it's not just me.
Yeah, they're different people. Yeah, when are we doing Life of a Showgirl? Brett already promised.
I will do it.
We'll
just
do it.
want you to know there is a side of me that is incredibly, deeply angry. Not deep rage, not that feminine rage, just mad. And that is what you will see.
What if we got you some edibles, like that girl on TikTok that has the stack of edibles like this, and it's like, come with me while I go to this restaurant.
That's what we should do, is we should get Brittany some gummies, and let's go on a journey through Life of a Showgirl.
It's the life. Yeah. The life of an attorney.
The life of a showgirl. It's so bad. And it's like, what was it? It's I'm not a bad bitch.
And this isn't
This isn't
savage.
savage, but I'm never gonna let you down. Yeah, we get it. Down, down. Like, I almost went outside and punched Bob in the face.
Bob from the copy room?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so we'll do something. Why do I want to torture you? Because it's funny. And because the only two Taylor Swift albums that I've listened to are Life of a Showgirl and The Tortured Poets Department.
The two worst ones.
So I have a very interesting view of Taylor Swift. Like, I listened to both of those albums. I did a bunch of research. I dug into the lore of everything going on so I could understand the songs. But just those two albums. So I'm like, I don't know who Joe Alwyn is. I don't know what all these songs are about. I just know Tortured Poets and Showgirl. Which is a very interesting perspective to have on Taylor.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
and I think somebody was intimating how Justin was like, I don't listen to pop, like, I'm not familiar with your music. And then Blake was like, that made me more mad than anything. I think it probably did, because Blake's normal power plays were not working with Justin.
Right.
I think, and one of Blake's normal power plays is like, I'm going to toy around with this language to turn you on and make you think that you have a shot with me. I don't think she ever liked him. I think she just uses that sort of overt sexuality to get her way.
Yeah.
It's yummy and flirty and ball busting, but never with teeth.
I just, and this is the thing, like, I've seen so many arguments from the pro Lively side on what this means. I don't think there's any way Jerry's going to think that's anything other than sexual. It doesn't help that he responds and says, sorry, I'm crying because my wife and kids just left for a couple weeks. Switch the genders, and everybody thinks that is a woman shutting down her creepy boss or something. Like, it totally. Just reads like, reminder, I'm married.
Yeah, I'm married. I don't like this. I don't think you can pair. Yeah, the pro Lively people love to be like, oh, the never with teeth thing isn't sexual because it's like,
technically,
you're not,
yeah.
On its own, you could say, oh, I'm not doing this with teeth. Like, you're thinking of a lion. Yeah, like an animal ripping something apart. But when you combine it with yummy, flirty, and ball busting.
Right. It's like, oh, this is a lot.
Once we have balls in there.
The whole thing. It's the whole conversation.
The whole thing becomes about male cunnilingus.
Okay, I have this thing. So take it easy. Said she invites him over to act it out. So this is something that I have always thought that this text message was a veiled threat from Brian Friedman. So let me go into my conspiracy theory about the ball busting text. So they cut it off at the end, but what she says is, do you want me to act it out for you next week, or I could send you a video right now if you prefer? And Justin responds, go ahead and send the video. So what this means is that there exists a video that Blake sent to Justin in which she is acting out the rooftop scene with all improvised dialogue or dialogue that she's written because she's rewriting this, that she felt she needed to send him at 2 a.m. And like, I don't know if that's coming in, but it could come in because it's a statement by a party opponent and it shows the work environment that they had. But I feel like people are so caught up in the ball busting thing that they don't realize she made a video, according to, or at least the text message implies that she made a video. So.
I need that video.
I mean, we might get to see that video.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, there are things like that where it's like, her story standing on its own, as we all have seen, sounds bad. But then you give it some context, and you give some of the context of how she behaves. And I don't think a jury, another talking point people love to throw out is, oh, just because she's a little unlikable doesn't mean she can't be harassed. But what it does mean, though, is that people are really reticent to take lukewarm at best behavior that you engage in and punish someone for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's making comments. He's saying things. All right, they showed you a video of a birth, all in the context of a movie set makes sense. I don't know. You're asking a jury to step away from their lives.
This is this is where he says, sorry, I was just crying my eyes out. And then he says, yes, send. It's important to the film, and I can't wait to play and find it. Just so you guys know why I'm thinking that this video exists. But the love is gargantuan and apparent. The love is gargantuan and apparent also seems like an innuendo. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, she speaks in innuendo a lot, right? Like she behaves towards men the way toxic men behave towards women.
Right.
And those are her I'm paraphrasing, but that's her characterization, right? So
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we'll see what the jury does. I do want to say, you guys, you really never know how a jury hears all this.
I know. Yeah.
It truly is a little unpredictable.
The other thing in this case is, I guess, because I there's going to be so much stuff that's admitted at trial. Like, there's going to be so much impeachment evidence.
980 pages, apparently.
Well, but even just like, you think things aren't coming in, and then somebody's going to fuck up and say something, and then something's going to come in.
Right.
So it's like when somebody says, oh, is this admissible? I'm like, probably, but like, it could anyway.
Yeah. Are we sure it was Blake texting and not Ryan? I feel they are the same person. I have asked that more than once. Is this her, or is this her just channeling her husband? She seems very insecure. Root chakra issues, am I right? But she does seem very insecure, and it's believable that she would maybe channel the speaking voice of the people around her who she thinks are more powerful. So it's hard to really know. I mean, she's saying those are her texts. We can take that at face value for whatever that's worth. We saw him writing messages for everyone in August. What's the biggest weakness in Wayfarer's case at this stage? What do you think? I think the text where he points out Hailey Bieber and he says something like this: all around the we can bury her, I want to feel protected, something like this. It seems like Justin is asking for them to smear Blake.
Right.
That, I think, is the thing Blake hangs her hat on for good reason. I think that's the worst thing, but it's inoculated a lot by, you have emotional, kind of hot-headed Justin Baldoni, who is not making the decision. Jamie Heath is.
Yeah, I think the fact that Jamie Heath is the one who like signed the contract, is the one who talked to Jed Wallace, is the one who hired people, I think that helps. And also, the other thing that I think helps against that text message is when he says, like, what does Jed do? And Melissa Nathan is like, Jamie and Jed connected on this. It does feel like she's been told not to involve him too closely. And I think it was to protect him from stress. But it does sound like he doesn't have a ton that he can testify to around it. So that, I think that helps. It's hard to say without knowing what Jed did. I also just don't think that like them asking for him saying something like that is going to matter to the jury if they don't have they need like a text. They need like them coming up with a narrative in the group chat and then showing how it happened online. Even like, okay, even I was thinking about this now that I have a YouTube channel. Even Lively's, we'll do this with the expert witness on Wednesday, but I was thinking about like how part of their evidence is that like certain catchphrases from the Cher, like bully and mean girl and tone deaf, caught up like 48 hours after Cher posted the video. Yeah. You know, and it wasn't like that for the first 48 hours, and then suddenly all these comments flood in. And you know what I realized? Because at first I was like, I don't, that's kind of compelling for me, right? That the first 48 hours look so different. And then I realized the first 48 hours on all our videos are, oh my God, Britt and Sarah, I love you guys. Or, oh, I've been
Yeah,
waiting for
yeah,
this all week. I've been waiting to see you guys on Monday. And then after a couple of days, we start getting comments like, oh, I was looking for content about this and I came across your video.
yeah. Just came across your video.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so it's like the first 48 hours, they're not watching it for Blake, they're watching it for Shersty. So the comments are like, fuck, I'm sorry that happened to you. She seems really mean. But then later
yeah,
on, other people, it's going around the internet, it's going around in the context of tone deaf and bully. And then they're like, let's go back to the original video and see what's going on.
yeah.
And then they leave those
No, that's a really
comments.
good point. The first however many comments are always going to be your following. And then if your
Right.
following engages a lot, then it kicks it out to the rest of the algorithm.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. Like,
Yeah.
don't quote
Yeah.
me on that. But right. So if there's a lot of engagement from the people who follow you, then whatever social media platform is going to go, oh, this is likable. Let's
Right.
give it to more people.
And
See
then
how they
they're
take
looking
it.
at it for Blake Lively content. So at
Right.
first, the people subscribed are there for Shersty, but then the algorithm pushes it out to people who are there for Blake.
Algorithm takes 1 to 2 days. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that you still argue it though.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was when Jed kicked in.
Right. Right.
That's Jed. I don't know. I would really like to see the judge, and again, we'll get into this on Wednesday, but I would really like to see the judge limit what the experts as far as online smear campaign can say. I would like to see that testimony whittled down. I do not want to see those experts fully kicked because
What
I
are they going
think
to
you
talk
need,
about?
yeah, I mean, I think you need somebody to come in and say, but it's a battle of the experts.
Yeah.
Yeah, chat, what do you think their Wayfarer's worst weakness is? I think
Maybe.
Jed actually could be, just depending on his deposition and how, because he's pretty evasive in what I've seen. He seems kind of unlikable. So if he's that way the whole way, I'm just like, oh, I don't love it. Melissa's text messages.
Yeah.
That's going to be tough to get in if tag
Yeah.
is dismissed too.
Jed's probably not.
So if,
Is Jed coming in if tag is dismissed?
probably not.
God.
Now, again, you can argue this is an exception to the hearsay rule because it goes to Blake's present sense impression, right? She gets this bulk of text messages and sees these and decides to act and bring this case and stand up for herself. I mean, I don't know. The impetus for filing is typically not an argument you make, but Blake's damages are this case. So
I mean, and so God, how much of this is even going to be admissible?
a ton of it isn't. And
yeah.
You make the argument, you make this is effect on the listener, right? So they're acting based on this, the hearsay exceptions are actually pretty robust. Like it's not a hard and fast rule. And so I think some of it comes in, especially the really egregious text messages, because the judge isn't going to want her to appeal and say, I had this piece of evidence saying with Justin Baldoni saying treat her like Hailey Bieber,
right,
and the judge wouldn't let me get that in.
I think the weakest part of Wayfarer's case is the idea that the jury itself could be open-minded to the concept of a smear campaign and could be open-minded to the idea that, like, this is where not being able to bring in all the sexual harassment could also work against Wayfarer, because they may imagine that there's more to it because they feel like her behavior is so irrational otherwise. Where it's like, if it's not made clear to the jury that what we're talking about is all that happened, and they just kind of mentally exaggerate a lot of it more. I think I've seen this with like some of the Lively fans who are also kind of the mock jury for this case, right? Where they're saying like, she wouldn't have done this if all he did was kiss or nuzzle the side of her neck or whatever. If the dance scene was all she had, there's no way she would have done this. And it's like, then you're in federal court in an oral argument and they're saying, yeah, this is our best evidence. But it's like the jury might think something must have gone on. There must be something we're not understanding. And they kind of think, well, we just kind of assume that happened. And then they're open to the idea that the smear campaign happened.
Right.
And then Wayfarer's having to convince them it didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
The reasonableness of her complaints
mm-hmm.
is really going to be an important point to drive home, because once you set them up for her complaints on set were unreasonable, you then kind of set her up for, we're hiring crisis PR not because of her complaints,
right,
but because she is unreasonable.
So, I mean, she's got to prove that they retaliated because of her complaint. She's got to prove her case first. So
it was the substantial motivating factor, I think, is what LGA said the language is.
And no, Gloria, they can't bring in the fact that anything that's happened on another film set.
If they had 5, 6, 10 of her doing this exact thing where it was like icing out other people against the person in charge, taking over the set with threats of sexual harassment to the point where she's editing and producing, or like substantially gathering. I think if you have that 5 or 6 times, you could bring it in as MO. But yeah, otherwise it's just character evidence, and it's...
The unfollowing is also possibly going to play against Wayfarer. It'll play when the jury first hears about it. I think it will play against them. I think when it's explained and it's put into the timeline, and I guess that depends on how it gets presented, it'll probably play for them. But initially, I think the jury is going to go, you're saying the entire cast voluntarily unfollowed him and there's nothing he did wrong?
Right.
So why did everybody unfollow him?
Which is how the public felt.
Yeah.
Why did the entire cast unfollow this guy? Is it don't worry, darling marketing thing? Or is it
It's they did put this on their exhibit list, the Blake Forbes interview. I don't know if how they're going to get it in or what they're going to do with it. But I think this will destroy her case. I think this is going to be a fight, but...
Remind me, which one was the Forbes interview?
This was in December of 23. So this is overlapping with some of the time after she'd been asked to do the film. She gave an interview at a Forbes business conference, and she said that she goes onto sets. She pretends that she just wants to be an actor and she's just excited to get the gig.
Oh,
and then she shows up and she starts making all of these changes. And then she says, and I've gotten
she takes authorship or whatever.
And then she said, and I've gotten pushback. And this is the part where I when I saw this interview, there's this facial expression she makes. And sometimes in mock juries, jurors are like, do you guys remember how they made this face when they said this? And like 7 people will be like, oh my God, I know, right? And they're like, they all remember this like really unnerving moment. But with Blake, what she does is she goes, and it's weird. And just for a split second, her like micro expression is that she's very like distressed as she's describing a director telling her no. Like she just has this exaggerated, like sad face for a second, just really briefly.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was like, oh God. Yeah, she described it as pulling the wool over people's eyes. And then, of course, if they get that in, the jury's going to think, so that's what you're doing to us. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the language you use. And Miss Lively, when you get on a set or when you sign on to a movie, you're pulling the wool over people's eyes. Isn't that right? Well, I wouldn't say it like that, but those are your words, aren't they, Miss Lively? Well, I don't really remember. Okay, let's pull this
We have
interview
this
up.
thing to show you. It's
Yeah,
not
and then you hit her
hearsay.
with
Yeah,
it.
it's a statement against party opponent. So let me pretend I'm an attorney for a second. They don't even need to admit it for the truth of the statement. They just need to admit it for truth that she had a successful reputation and she often spoke about the amount of control that she had on sets. Right?
So anything Wayfarer brings, any evidence they want to bring that is a prior statement of Blake's, that is excluded from the hearsay rule.
Okay.
Meaning categorically, it is not hearsay.
Okay.
It's not an exception. It is not hearsay.
Okay.
Because you want people to be able to come
That's
into
true.
court
Yeah.
and say, they said this to me.
So they have
You
to, but
would
they
not
still have to
be
show
able to bring
relevance.
civil cases without
Right.
it.
No, yeah, I'm just thinking they have to show relevance though, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to meet the muster of like relevance. It's got to be more probative than prejudicial.
Okay.
I don't think the tranny thing should come in.
Okay. Yeah,
because I don't think that was a big part of the dialogue.
Yeah.
But
the Forbes interview then would come in because what they're saying is she's talking about how she has control on film sets right before we hired her.
She does this.
Yeah.
She's bragging about this. She's
Yeah.
bragging about this to her friends. And then she did it. And she used sexual harassment as a proxy to get her way.
I'm just sorry. Zane said, not taking no for an answer. Imagine if a man said that. My God. I need to show you guys something.
Again, let's be the change we want to see in the world, people. Like, behaving the way men behave is not going to end patriarchy or white supremacy or racism or any of the isms. Yeah.
And look at the time frame, November 23.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is her public presentation.
And
yeah.
You know, there are many women that feel that this is fine, right? Ha ha, hee hee, funny joke.
Right.
But now in the context of this entire story, not so funny anymore because she genuinely doesn't think men count.
Right. It just, you know. God, I wonder if the Taylor text message. So no, this was 20, or sorry, somebody said 13 days after she delivered her sexual harassment. This is, oh God, yes, it was, isn't it? What's the timeline where she said, it was November 23,
yeah, it was
wasn't
November.
it?
Yeah.
November, okay, so the actual email, request for protections.
November 9th.
November 9th. Jesus. Yeah. Oh, I meant to take the comment down, not this. Yeah, 13 days after she says, I don't want to be, inappropriate behavior on set. This is what she posts on Instagram.
And this is Betty Buzz. That's the Betty Booze is the...
I think there's alcohol in this. They're kind of under the same Instagram. I don't know that they have...
Got it.
Yeah, I think they have the same...
It's all one umbrella Instagram. That makes sense.
Yeah. Mentioned that image was reverse gendered and the caption was cruelty free unless women count.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, this is so bad. Miss Andrea is kind of understandable, right? Because you're going to hate your oppressor. I get that, right? It's sort of like reverse racism isn't a real thing. Like black people are allowed to hate white people because we are the oppressors. So in some ways, like I understand what sentiment this is trying to get to with marketing.
Yeah. Like I see this.
It's not an excuse for us to be engaging in just this sort of blatant patriarchal marketing.
Like, okay, but look at this comment. And that's the guy Blake got Justin Baldoni to hire as his body double on Dance With Us. Are you saying this guy in this picture? Because is this like another fucking Deadpool Easter egg? Like, or Nice Pool type thing?
Justin Baldoni on... He had a body double on A Dance With Us?
She hired it as part of that 17-point agreement. They both got body doubles, but then they didn't use them, and they just did the scenes together. So this is the guy that she hired as the body double for Justin Baldoni, and 13 days after she asked for this request, she has this ad of him where she's shoving alcohol in his mouth
and saying men don't count.
And like the thing is, like normally I'd be like, well, that's kind of weird, but then it's like you've got the Nice Pool that could have well been going on at this point already.
Somebody else said that's not him. Now I'm really confused.
No,
she coerced.
There were new body doubles though. There were new body doubles at one point.
He is also the same guy that is spread eagle on a countertop, and then the guy she propped her feet on in the picture. He looks like a black man, but it's actually him. Oh, so that whole photo shoot was this guy.
This might be a different
guy. I do remember the one on the counter kind of vaguely.
Yeah. And then there's an Ottoman one, and his skin does look darker, but it's the same. It's a white model, but his skin looks darker. It's photoshopped.
I guess it's just like that. This is how I feel about a lot of Ryan's marketing, where I'm like, I get what they're going for and who they're going for. It's just not for me.
Right. It's,
so it's so hard for me to be like, is this likable? I kind of get it, but also like, I don't like it.
The whole thing feels, it's kind of like the thing with the Kate Middleton thing. The whole thing, some of their marketing just feels very dark.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just feels unnecessarily nasty. It's kind of like the thing with the Coldplay couple. Yeah, it's like, wait, what'd you say?
And then getting Gwyneth Paltrow to come up and be like,
yeah, it's just like it's unnecessarily nasty somehow.
Yeah. Good night. Yeah, I probably should go to bed too.
I should too. It's 9:15. All right, we are going to do this again on Wednesday, and we are going to talk about all the other expert witnesses and the smear campaign and all of that. Thank you to everybody who's joining us from Lauren's live. We have 317 people. What were you going to say?
Yeah. We may go live a little earlier if you're into it. We haven't talked about this, so I'm springing this on you live. But I have to be at the Taekwondo studio at 7:45.
Okay.
So we'll be a little earlier.
Work?
So what's that?
Or would Thursday work, or do you have Taekwondo on Thursday?
I have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as Taekwondo.
Okay. So yeah, we can do it earlier. 5:30 is the earliest I could do my time. So that's 4:30 your time. So, but we'll figure it out, and I'll post a thing on here. All right. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks everyone.
And we will see you on Wednesday probably. New lore dropped. Britt is a black belt. Almost a black belt, right?
Britt is almost a black belt. She will be a black belt this time next year.
Yes. And we'll still be talking about Lively v. Wayfarer. So
we will be talking
Cassidy is going live with Omar at 12. Is that 12 tonight Eastern time? So that's here in like 45 minutes to talk about the federal rules of evidence. And Blake's
awesome. Tell Omar I'd love to be in the same room with him someday. Room, obviously.
Virtual room.
Yeah.
They can both nerd out about federal rules of evidence. So yeah, that's a 12 Eastern time today. So that is in about 45 minutes. If you guys all want to Cassidy and Omar on Cassidy's channel.
We would direct them to you, but I don't know how to do that.
I don't know how to do that either, but it's also in 45 minutes. So everybody go get a drink of water, brush your teeth, get cozy.
Yeah. Grab your pajamas.
Yeah.
Wear your florals.
Wear your floral pajamas. Grab your Betty Buzz. And yeah. All right.
Hating sentiment. And have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.